Hello, welcome back to Rambling in a Closet. This is Kyle. I can't say it's technically rambling this time, as I've written down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 notes. So it's going to be mostly rambling, but I did take notes this time because something really important happened. I think a general theme of mine that I like to think, at least of the way I think, is a very hippie-esque sense of love everybody. That's how you get out of a lot of things, a lot of bad ways in life. Love your neighbor. It's pretty important. I think there's a severe lack of that. I don't want to say nowadays because that makes me sound like I think I've been around a long time, but it definitely seems like there's a lot less love going on, and that's kind of sad. It's a lot easier to hate thy neighbor. I think social media has an effect on that. I don't want to get into this too much because it's been talked about to death by other people, but yeah, it definitely seems like not a lot of love going on. I think we need more of that. There is one thing I think it's okay to hate, though, and I don't know if this is proper, if this is okay, but I'm just going to say it because it's what I'm thinking. I think it's okay to hate evil. I think that's okay. I think if you can properly identify it, it's evil. I think you can hate it. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe it's a crazy idea. I think it's perfectly acceptable. And there's one thing I don't think anybody, maybe except for me and some other people that I know about, I don't think anybody hates government enough. Now, I don't want to get political. I've tried very hard not to be political. This is not political. I don't care who's in office. I don't care if it's a D or an R or someone who I like or dislike or you like or dislike. There is something about government that can be hated. And I'm not even talking about government officials. I'm not talking about the people that make up the government. And there's another conversation for those people too. There's good and bad people, of course, in government. But I'm just thinking of it as an institution, government. There's a story that came out last night. Have you heard of Peanut the Squirrel? I'm pretty confident in the past 7 years I've heard about this guy just by seeing him on, the internet, the Twitter and the Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, seeing little shorts about a little squirrel that was living in a house. Peanut was this squirrel. Exactly. Social media person. Except a squirrel. And Mark Longo was his owner. He owns this animal sanctuary with like 300 other animals, including Fred the Raccoon, by the way. This story is centered around Peanut the Squirrel and Fred the Raccoon. They were minding their own business. I don't know if this was like last week or 2 days ago or whatever, but this is in the past few days. And they got raided by a government department, the Government Department of Environmental Conservation in New York State. They got raided. And Peanut the Squirrel and Fred the Raccoon got confiscated. And then 2 days later got euthanized by the government to test them for rabies. Now, that's the general story. I'm sure there's a lot more going on, but the bullet points are there. Dude and his raccoon, and squirrel, of course, minding their own business, raided by the government, and then they died 2 days later because apparently one of the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, said that Peanut bit investigators' hand while being confiscated. Well, first of all, I don't even know if I believe that because that just sounds funny because apparently the squirrel's been very peaceful the past 7 years. He's been a social media guy. It's pretty easy to be a peaceful squirrel if you're famous, I think. I don't know. I'm not a squirrel. First of all, I don't believe that necessarily. Second of all, if it was true, yeah, good. Okay, you deserve a little bite on the finger there, DEC investigator, for raiding an American family's home. By the way, on taxpayer dollars, who are paying for you to raid their home and take their squirrel and raccoon. I don't think you hate government enough. I don't think you do. Maybe you do. If you do, good on you. But yeah. I read this story this morning, just scrolling through Twitter, and I was like, oh my God. And by the way, this is not by any chance or by any stretch of the imagination the worst thing the U.S. government has done as an organization. Again, don't want to get political. Don't want to be super, down and depressing. Like think about let's take it to a higher level. I mean, if you think about Waco in Texas, By the way, two things can be true. I don't know if you know anything about Waco. I highly recommend going and watching something about Waco. It's fascinating and disturbing and sad. Two things can be true about Waco. One, the cult, well, were they a cult technically? Yeah, let's just say they were a cult. The cult people, let's just say at least the leader guy probably wasn't very good. I don't know if he was doing anything illegal. I know they had some guns going on, but it's America, so you're allowed to have guns. I know there's specific reasons why the FBI went to Waco. I'm not even saying that the going to Waco to do an investigation and like audit them is a bad thing. I mean, I don't think you should, but I guess there's an argument for it. I just want to I'm going to strong man the FBI here and the cult at the same time. The cult might not have been doing great things, but if you learn what happened at Waco, you can't. I mean, their children and women were burned alive in the building. It's by the U.S. government, by the way. Long story, a lot of more details to that. But to make it a little less serious, though, Peanut the Squirrel and Fred the Raccoon were just killed by the U.S. government. I'm laughing, by the way, because it's just ridiculous. I'm not trying to, if you don't laugh, you cry, right? Apparently, the DEC received complaints about Mark's squirrel and raccoon and probably other animals. I imagine the complaints went along the lines of, they're not, they shouldn't have these animals. They're wild animals. They deserve to be in the wild, and they're probably not being taken care of properly. They're not getting their omega-3 or something. I don't know. Or maybe it was, hey, there's animals over here. I don't know. I see. This is the thing. I can't. I like to think of myself pretty good at empathizing. It's very hard for me to empathize with someone who would call the cops on their American citizen neighbor, even if it's an internet neighbor, for owning a raccoon and a squirrel. Clearly, the squirrel was taken care of well. I don't know what the average lifespan of a squirrel is, but this guy's been kicking for 7 years before he was killed by the U.S. government. I guess I shouldn't say U.S. government. Obviously, yes, but New York State government. I should say New York State government. 7-year-old squirrel. He must have been healthy, right? Like I said, I don't know the average lifespan here, but I imagine 7 years is pretty good for a squirrel, and it was snuffed out by the New York State government. First of all, can you imagine being one of those people complaining to the government? I've always been skeptical of people who will call the government on people. I understand calling the cops, obviously, but there is a line. I remember back in COVID, during the great COVID pandemic. Again, don't want to get political. This is just a thing that happened, okay? In New York State, too. I think it was, I can't remember who the mayor is. I don't want to say who I think it is because it might just be wrong. But the mayor put out a task force or whatever about a call line for people to call the government on their neighbors who were not wearing masks and not doing proper COVID stuff. The literal quote from the New York State government was, snitches get rewards. Snitches get rewards. And they were like, yeah, thumbs up. Snitch on your neighbor. And by the way, to the great people of New York's credit, I think it was pretty funny. The hotline got a lot of prank calls. A lot of people blowing up their lines, either being funny or just being outright, I can't believe you're asking your people to do this to their fellow American citizens. But people did call the hotline for the intended purpose. Now, I get it. Some people were really thinking COVID was pretty bad back then. And so let's just give this potential person who called the cops the most strongest argument. They really thought COVID was a killer of all people, of all ages, of all health ranges. Whether or not you have 3 comorbidities or not, COVID's going to get you. And you see your neighbor who's wearing a big red MAGA hat who just won't put his mask on. He's like, I'm not going to do that. I would rather be free than safe. And he's walking around coughing on everybody. And you go, oh my gosh, we got to stop this guy. I don't know what I can do, but I'm going to call this hotline. and maybe they'll do something about it. I don't know. I get it. Okay, I again would never do that. I really can't empathize with that. I'm trying to give them, like, if you really think that COVID was going to kill you and your son, and you saw this guy just not caring about it, yeah, okay, fine, maybe, I understand, but no, I still wouldn't do it. I just go talk to the guy, put a mask on, go talk to him, be like, hey, bud, I got a kid, But anyways, that's not even talking about, again, don't want to talk about COVID too much because you stray into the political. Because what's funny, in that last 5 minutes, hopefully you don't know my politics. Well, okay, you can probably guess my politics based on the last 5 minutes. But you know what I didn't say? I didn't give you statistics about how many, what age demographic COVID kills the most. And I also didn't give you any really hardcore opinions from people who thought that COVID was not so bad. I don't know if that made any sense. I think it's pretty clear what my politics are. But at the same time, I'm trying to be pretty neutral here. I'm not trying to be on... that's why I love this story of Peanut. Oh, I don't want to say I love this story. This is the problem with rambling, is you just say stuff. This is why this story is a good story to talk about government corruption, because it's very apolitical. And I think everybody can get behind squirrels and a raccoon. Let's not forget about Fred the Raccoon. I watched a lot of stuff. Not a lot, but like a couple videos before I started talking into this microphone here about this story. And most of it's always talking about Peanut the squirrel, but a lot of it, little is mentioned about Fred the Raccoon. So let's not forget, he was also a casualty here, Fred. Can you imagine this whole situation? First of all, Mark Long said, I guess like 6, 7, or 8 government officials showed up and went through his house for like 5 hours, looking, ransacking it. Not a nice light government ransacking. Not destroying things, but lifting them up and not putting them in their proper place after you're done looking there. Yeah, that kind of thing, which is still annoying. So apparently, then the squirrel bites one of the investigators, which A, I don't believe, but B, if true, good. So what does the DEC say? Well, the DEC takes the animals back to wherever they take them to, and goes, well, one of the investigators got bit, so we're going to have to kill them to test them for rabies, because I guess you can't test an animal for rabies without killing them. Don't know about rabies tests. Maybe this is 100% true. I don't care. What the heck? They kill. So get this, right? This is why you should hate government. Not necessarily the people in government, but the idea of government. Let's just bring it all down to some bullet points here. Some, we're going to be nice, some caring Americans called some department, whether it be the police or animal whatever or PETA, some Americans called and complained about Mark Longo's animals, specifically his squirrel and raccoon, I guess out of a sense of care, right? Like, oh no, he might not be treating the animals well, right? So we should, call the cops and call the government, and that's what we should do to help these animals. The government shows up. By the way, 4 departments and 1 judge signed off on the search warrant for this guy's animal sanctuary. We'll get back to that. The government shows up, confiscates, after 5 hours of searching the entire house, confiscates the 2 animals, and then 2 days later kills them. Good job, everybody involved. I don't like, even if there were no complaints and the government was just showing up, why is the government confiscating a squirrel and a raccoon if it's not about like, oh, you're not treating these animals properly, and then 2 days later they're dead. So good job, everybody. You, out of complete compassion, murdered a squirrel and a raccoon because you thought they might have rabies. By the way, the raccoon never bit anybody, so why we kill Fred? Okay? Peanut, he took a piece out of a guy's finger, okay? Good job, Peanut. But Fred didn't do anything. Fred probably was completely innocent and was murdered because they wanted to see if he had rabies, which I think it's a safe bet that he did not have rabies because these are 2 house pets. It's a house raccoon. It's a house squirrel. I don't know much about rabies. Maybe I shouldn't say too much, but how can you get rabies? I thought you just get to get it bit by something else, or I guess it's got to come from something other than a bite, right? I don't know. Again, you know what? I'm going to take a few seconds and Google this. Where does rabies come from? Well, it says it's just by saliva of a toxic animal, so it's got to get passed on from animal to animal to animal. But like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. I digress. Seriously though, you don't hate government enough. I don't hate government enough, I think. And by the way, let's go back to these officials. 4 departments. I don't have all the information here, so don't quote me on this. Let's just say at least 1 department and 1 judge, because that's all that's necessary. But according to Mark Longo and the news I read, 4 departments and 1 judge signed off on a search warrant, which means, get this, at least, I guess, okay, again, don't know for sure, but let's just say at least a few individuals had to look this request over for a warrant and go, yeah, I think we need to go and search this place. Can you just you listening right now, try to put yourself in the feet of any one of these people who had to go, yeah, this is a good idea. Can you imagine? I mean, this is the great thing about human beings, is we are very good at empathizing for the most part. I think most people are good at empathizing. So I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise with me. Can you imagine signing off on a document that says the New York state government is going to search a fellow American's house because apparently there might be a squirrel and or a raccoon there that is not being treated properly? Now, we don't know all the details about what was on the warrant and why they searched it, but let's just, have a little fun here. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being that judge and going, yeah, this is a good idea? Can you imagine being any one of these department heads going, yeah, we should definitely search this guy's house and potentially take his squirrel or raccoon? Can you imagine that? No, you can't? Huh, shocking. I don't blame you. You could be the best person in empathy. I like to think of myself as a pretty empathetic person. I don't know. I think most people do, probably. It's one of that Dunning-Kruger effect things where you think you're better than you are. But I moderately so. I like to think I'm pretty good at empathizing. Let's just say average or slightly above average, okay? And I can't do it. I cannot understand for the life of me why you would say yes to any of this. Now, if the warrant said Mark Longo is torturing this squirrel and raccoon every day, we have videographic evidence. We have evidence. Here it is. It's terrible. We got to go stop this animal cruelty. I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead. But as far as we know, you have 7 years of social media evidence showing that it looks like Peanut the squirrel is pretty doing okay. First of all, 7 years old. Second of all, looks pretty happy in all of his videos. I haven't watched all of them. I don't think there's any squirrel torture going on, though. Safe to say. So no, you can't imagine what it's like to sign off on a warrant to go confiscate a squirrel. Probably because you're a good person. Probably because you are a person who has not had a lot of power given to them in life, which is good, by the way. And you have not been corrupted by this terrible thing called government and force and power. And let's just get something clear. What's the difference between what's the difference between you knocking on Mark Longo's door and saying, hey, I got some complaints. We're worried. I represent an organization. We're worried about how the squirrel and raccoon are being treated. We were just wondering if maybe we can come in and do like a welfare check. Obviously, you'd have to say yes because we're a private citizen. We can't really do anything. But, would you be okay with us checking in on how the squirrel and raccoon are being taken care of? Maybe you can even do a video about it and show how you do have people come in and check and that everything is good and safe and the squirrels and all the other 300 animals are being taken care of in this facility. What's the difference between that situation, a private citizen coming to Mark Longo and saying, hey, I'm worried about your squirrel and raccoon? What's the difference between that and the government doing it? Well, the government has guns. The government, if you don't do what the government says, you could get in some big trouble. If you don't do what the private citizen is asking, well, the private citizen just goes away. Well, okay, all right, I guess. I was hoping I could, check in on your squirrel and raccoon, but I get it. You don't want me in your house, whatever. Kind of sus, as the kids say, suspect, But whatever, I can't, it's not like I can force myself into your house. Not like the New York State government, Department of Environmental Conservation. They can force their way into your house. They can search through the whole thing, and you can't do anything about it. By the way, Mark, in his own home, had to have a police escort to use the bathroom during this 5-hour search and seizure of his private property. of the New York state government. Can you imagine? What's the difference between the government and the citizen doing it? The government has force, and they can tell you to do something, and you have to obey, or you could be in trouble. I say or because sometimes they'll just let you defy them, but that's very rare, especially in this situation. By the way, forget the department heads and the judge who had to sign off on this warrant. Can you imagine being any one of these officers, investigators that went to his house? Would you feel good about yourself? Think about it. You're kind of standing there, your arms crossed. You're outside of Mark Longo's house waiting for him to answer the door, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing the Lord's work. I'm doing really good work right now. We're going to go and search this guy's house because of a squirrel and a raccoon might be being treated badly. I feel like this is my purpose in life. This is why I was put here, to stop this crime. Forget about all the actual crime that's going on at this exact moment right now, probably within our jurisdiction of Department of Environmental Conservation, but I'm thinking about this poor squirrel Peanut. Yeah, can you imagine being any one of these government officials? No, you can't. Shocking. Probably because, like I said earlier, you're a good person. You've never been corrupted by power. And by the way, I don't want to give anybody an easy out and say, well, the only reason people act badly is because they're corrupted by power. No, maybe some of these some of these DEC guys like doing this kind of thing. I don't know. I don't like to be negative towards people. Like I said in the beginning, I think we need to love everybody and be very patient and caring and kind and forgiving and towards individuals, towards people, towards our fellow Americans especially, as well as the rest of the world. So I don't want to rag too much on the lovely ladies and gentlemen who participated in this. But it is totally okay to hate the instrument that they used to, let's be honest, tyrannize and euthanize Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon. Remember what we're talking about here. 2 pet animals were killed by the New York state government because they were worried about their welfare. You can't hate the government enough. The government being the tool that is used to... And by the way, does the government do some good things? Yeah, I guess. You know, obviously there are exceptions to a rule. But it seems like the government tends to just suck at everything it tries to do. Again, not trying to be political here. But have you looked at the Department of Education? Have you looked at the educational stats of Americans? By the way, we didn't have the DOE. Most of us have parents who went to school before the DOE was created. I think it was late 60s, early 70s maybe? And ever since the Department of Education, an entire department of government created to educate, apparently to make things better, right? What has happened since they've been in power? Education got worse. And now we're not even top 10 in the world of being educated. Can you believe that? I can. Again, don't want to digress too much into potentially political territory, but just throwing that out there. They're not the government, they being the government. That's not the most effective tool. And the reason being, I think, is because of the inherent nature of government, which is force. They have guns. They can force you to do something, and if you don't do it, you can get into trouble. I mean, let's go back to that original example that I gave about the private citizen. I mean, Mark Longo would have every reason, if he was truly doing the right thing and treating these 2 and the rest of his animals properly, Mark Longo would have every reason to allow this private citizen into his home to do a welfare check and to record it and to make a cool little video about it as part of his social media presence. And show, hey, look, we let this guy in. He wants to do a welfare check. Here's everything he's doing to make sure Fred and Peanut are doing okay. We treat him right. We hope that you have thought we've treated them right this whole time, but here is, good solid evidence of you in case you're worried about the welfare of these animals. Mark Longo would have every reason to say yes to this and to get a welfare check done if he was doing the right thing, right? Which I think he was, No force required, no guns, no warrants, no threat of imprisonment or fines, nothing. Just common sense, kindness, and voluntary, what's the word I'm trying to think of here? And voluntary cooperation. There we go. And the government comes in with a piece of paper signed by a judge with guys who will potentially put you in jail if you stop them from doing what they're going to do. They raid the house, they confiscate the animals by force, and then they kill them 2 days later. Just think about that. That's what happened. That's what the story is about. You can't hate government enough. And this is what frustrates me the most. I'll end on this. I am sick and tired of Americans being told to hate their fellow Americans. Whether you're on the right or whether you're on the left, we're told that the other side is bad and that they are a threat to our, American democracy, democratic republic, to our American way of living. And this frustrates me to no end. I know people who disagree with me wildly on all sorts of things, and I don't hate them. I love them just like I love everybody else. And I care for them. And yeah, they can be a little frustrating, but good gosh, I don't hate them like I hate the government. And I think everybody should feel that way. This is what being an American is about. Not going to the government to get what you want done. No, it's about living your own life and getting the government the hell out of the way of you and your fellow Americans so that you can live well and prosper and pursue happiness and live in a country full of liberty and justice. That's what we want. We want to be friends with our neighbors. We don't want to look at them with a side eye wondering, did you wear a mask or didn't you during the great COVID scare? I don't want to be that. This is so terrible that we are in this state right now where we think of these things as when we think these things of our fellow Americans, when there is an institution, a state, a tool called the U.S. government and, the state governments that goes and kills a squirrel and a raccoon because they're trying to help it. This is the kind of thing that we should all be looking at with side eyes, not each other. And I really hope that maybe in the future I can be a little more convincing of this. I don't know if this is the kind of thing I want to talk about all the time, but this is something I'm very passionate about. Government overreach, government power. And I think the story ties in well to that sort of thing because it's a little lighthearted, but it's actually really depressing. I mean, think about this. An innocent squirrel and an innocent raccoon were murdered by the New York State government because the New York State government thought that the squirrel and the raccoon were potentially being treated improperly. That's the government. And I'd rather hate the government, which kills squirrels and raccoons. I'd rather hate the government than hate you. And I think you can agree with that. Agree with me on that one. I want to go ahead and be done for now. Talk to you later. Rambling in a Closet. This is Kyle. Find me on Twitter. By the way, look at this story. He's raising money for legal defenses. I don't have any money, but go check him out. He's got a GoFundMe and a couple others, the other sites that do it. There's GoFundMe and there's, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the other one. It's pretty big. But if you can, that'd be great. Go help him out. Mark Longo. Look up the story. Read about it.